A billionaire rescues twin sisters from the streets and leaves them in the care of their mother. But when he returns home, he finds one of them holding the key that will change his life forever. The rain was relentless, a cold sheet of water spilling across the pavement as Christian Stewart adjusted his umbrella against the wind. The streets of Manhattan were unusually quiet, the usual cacophony of traffic muffled by the downpour. His shoes splashed through shallow puddles, the wet chill creeping into his otherwise immaculate appearance. A tailored grey suit now damp at the cuffs. He was tired, the weight of another grueling day of meetings pressing heavily on his shoulders. Stewart Mansion was only a few blocks away, but the promise of its warmth felt impossibly distant. As he turned a corner, his steps faltered, caught by a sight that sliced through the monotony of the evening. Two figures huddled together on a bench beneath the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. The older one, no more than 10, sat upright, arms wrapped tightly around a smaller child nestled against her chest. Their clothes were soaked through, clinging to thin frames and their faces pale under the harsh light. Christian hesitated. He wasn't the type to involve himself in strangers' affairs, yet there was something in the way the older girl shielded the younger one, her sharp gaze darting around as though daring anyone to approach. She displayed a fierce, fragile bravery that halted him abruptly. "Are you girls okay?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice firm but gentle. The older girl stiffened, drawing the younger child closer. "We're fine," she replied curtly, her tone far too resolute for someone her age. The defiance in her voice wavered, betrayed by the tremor in her hands. Christian squatted slightly to meet her eye level, folding his umbrella as the rain slicked his dark hair to his forehead. "You don't look fine," he said, keeping his tone steady. "It's freezing out here. You'll catch pneumonia." The younger child, her head resting against her sister's chest, peeked out with wide, weary eyes. "Anna," she whispered faintly, tugging at her sister's sleeve. Anna, Christian assumed that was the older one's name, gave her sister a quick, reassuring squeeze. "It's okay, Janet," she murmured, before glaring back at Christian. "We don't need help. We're waiting for someone." "Who are you waiting for?" Christian asked, though the emptiness of the street answered for her. The girls had no one. Anna didn't reply, her chin jutting out stubbornly. It was Janet who spoke, her voice a fragile whisper. "We're hungry." "Janet," Anna hissed, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of shame and frustration. Christian felt a pang of something unfamiliar, empathy, perhaps, or guilt for hesitating even this long. He exhaled slowly, softening his expression. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Christian. I live just a few blocks away, and there's plenty of food and warmth there. You can't stay out here all night." Anna's eyes narrowed, suspicion etched into every line of her small face. "Why would you help us?" Christian considered his answer, aware that words alone wouldn't convince her. He straightened and stepped back, giving her space. "Because you remind me of someone I used to know," he said simply. While it wasn't the complete truth, it also wasn't a lie. And no one should be out in weather like this. For a long moment, Anna didn't move, her gaze flickering between Christian, Janet, and the empty street. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping in reluctant surrender. "Okay," she muttered, "but if you try anything, I'll scream." Christian suppressed a smile. "Fair enough." The walk to Stewart Mansion was quiet, save for the rhythmic patter of rain and Janet's occasional sniffles. When they reached the mansion, its warm light spilling onto the rain-soaked driveway, Anna hesitated again. "Is this your house?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Christian nodded and pushed open the heavy oak door, revealing the grand but inviting interior. Megan appeared in the foyer, her silver hair gleaming in the light. She was carrying a tray of teacups, but froze when she saw the damp and shivering children by Christian's side. "Christian," she began, her tone laced with both curiosity and concern. "They need a place to stay tonight," Christian explained briefly, "and some food." Megan's gaze softened as she approached, her warmth radiating like the fireplace crackling in the nearby sitting room. "Oh, you poor dears," she murmured, setting the tray aside and ushering them in. "Come, let's get you dry. Dinner will be ready soon." Anna clung to Janet, her eyes scanning the room warily, but Janet leaned into Megan's touch, drawn to her soothing presence. Christian watched as his mother knelt to help them out of their soaked shoes, her words gentle and unhurried. For the first time in what felt like years, something shifted in his chest, a quiet, unexpected tug at his carefully guarded heart. The grand doors of Stewart Mansion closed with a soft thud, sealing out the drumming rain and the chill of the night. Inside, the warm glow of chandelier light spilled across polished floors, high ceilings, and walls adorned with art that whispered stories of a past neither Anna nor Janet could imagine. The faint scent of aged wood and fresh flowers lingered in the air, a fragrance foreign, yet oddly comforting. Anna stood stiffly near the threshold, her gaze darting to every corner, as though she expected someone to appear and scold her for stepping inside. Beside her, Janet gripped the hem of Anna's damp sweater, wide-eyed and silent, her breath barely audible above the crackling of the fireplace in the adjacent room. Christian watched them from a few steps away, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't sure what he expected, gratitude maybe, or relief. But instead, he was met with silence, so fragile it threatened to shatter if he spoke. He glanced at his mother, Megan, who had returned from the kitchen with a folded blanket draped over her arm. "Here, darling," Megan said softly, kneeling before Janet. She unfolded the blanket with practiced ease, wrapping it snugly around the girl's small shoulders. "This will warm you up. And you too, Anna," she added, offering another blanket with a gentle smile. Anna hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly as though she were weighing Megan's intentions. But when Janet's trembling subsided beneath the soft fabric, Anna relented, clutching the blanket tightly against her chest. "It's big," Janet whispered, her voice small but curious as her gaze wandered toward the ornate staircase curling upward like a question mark. "It is," Christian replied, stepping closer. "But it's just a house. Houses don't bite." Janet's lips quirked upward slightly, though her grip on Anna didn't loosen. Anna's shoulders tensed, her protectiveness as fierce as it was unyielding. Christian recognized it immediately, the same vigilance he had once used to shield himself from a world he didn't fully trust. Megan, sensing the unease, straightened with a light clap of her hands. "Let's get you both something warm to eat. The kitchen is this way," she said, motioning gently. Anna didn't move. "We're not staying," she blurted out, her voice firm but trembling slightly at the edges. Megan paused, her expression unchanging, but her tone deliberate. "Let's take one step at a time, dear. For now, let's just make sure you're comfortable." Anna's jaw tightened, but she allowed Janet to tug her forward. Christian followed at a measured pace, his gaze lingering on the sisters as they walked through the corridor, their small frames dwarfed by the towering paintings that lined the walls. Janet stopped suddenly, her head tilting as her eyes fixed on one of the paintings. It was an oil piece, its vibrant strokes depicting a serene lake framed by a dense forest. Her fingers twitched as though itching to reach out and trace the textured surface. "Do you like it?" Megan asked, noticing Janet's pause. Janet nodded, her voice barely audible. "It looks real, like I could go inside it." Christian, leaning against the doorframe, watched the exchange in silence. He had walked this corridor countless times, barely glancing at the artwork that now captivated Janet. Her gaze wasn't just admiration. It was longing, an unspoken yearning for something she couldn't name. "She likes to draw," Anna said suddenly, her voice low. Christian glanced at her, surprised that she had offered any information at all. "She's always drawing when we find paper. Or walls." Janet's cheeks flushed, but the faintest smile played on her lips. "Well," Megan said, her voice light, "this house could use more art. Maybe Janet can make us something to hang here one day." Janet's smile faltered, and she ducked her head shyly. Anna's expression darkened as her eyes scanned the hallway once more, seemingly searching for the hidden meaning in Megan's words. Christian said nothing, his thoughts caught in the sudden realization of how little he understood about the girls, or for that matter himself. That night, long after the girls had been coaxed into a warm dinner and shown to a guest room, Christian found himself in the same hallway where Janet had paused. The painting loomed before him, its surface catching the faint glow of a wall sconce. He studied it, with a detachment that didn't quite fit, his thoughts drifting to the girls upstairs. Megan's footsteps were soft behind him. "You're thinking too much," she said simply. Christian glanced over his shoulder. "They're just kids. Children who have seen too much," Megan replied, her voice calm but pointed. "You see it, don't you? In their eyes." Christian didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned back to the painting, his jaw tightening. "I see it," he admitted quietly. "I just don't know what to do with it." "You'll figure it out," Megan said, resting a reassuring hand on his arm before leaving him alone with his thoughts. As the silence of the mansion settled around him, Christian couldn't shake the feeling that the girls had brought something with them, something quiet but profound. It wasn't just their vulnerability, it was the way they made the house, for the first time in years, feel like more than a collection of rooms. The painting stared back at him, its stillness almost mocking, as though it held secrets he wasn't ready to face. Morning light spilled through the towering windows of Stuart Mansion, illuminating the intricate patterns on the Persian rugs and bouncing off the polished wood of the banister. The house was unusually quiet. Even the usual hum of activity from the staff was subdued, as though they were holding their breath, waiting for something fragile to settle. In the dining room, Christian sat at the head of the long oak table, scanning the spread of food arranged meticulously before him. Across from him, Anna stared at her plate with an intensity that suggested she was thinking about something far more pressing than breakfast. Janet sat beside her, nibbling on a slice of toast as she glanced around the room, her eyes wide with curiosity. Megan entered, her calm presence filling the space as she carried a steaming pot of tea. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, setting the pot down and taking a seat near the girls. Anna shrugged, not meeting Megan's eyes. "The bed's too soft," she muttered. Megan smiled gently. "That's something we can fix if you'd like. I'll ask the housekeeper to find firmer bedding." Anna glanced at her sister, clearly uncertain how to respond to such an offer. Janet, however, brightened a little. "It was warm," she said softly, as though sharing a secret. Christian, observing the exchange, leaned back in his chair. "You'll get used to it," he said casually. "This place can feel strange at first, but it grows on you." Anna's gaze darted toward him, skeptical but silent. Christian wasn't sure what he had expected. Gratitude, perhaps, or even resentment. But what he saw in her eyes was something quieter, endurance. She was a child who had learned to carry too much. Later that day, Christian found himself in the study, leafing through a map he'd pulled from one of the leather-bound atlases that lined the shelves. He barely noticed Anna hovering in the doorway until her voice broke the silence. "What are you looking at?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Christian turned, surprised to see her there. "It's a map of the city," he said, holding it up. "Come here, I'll show you." Anna hesitated, her fingers gripping the doorframe. After a moment, she stepped inside, keeping her distance as she glanced at the map. Christian knelt to spread it out on the floor, the sprawling streets and boroughs of New York stretching between them like a puzzle. "Do you know where you are?" he asked, pointing to a small dot near Central Park. Anna frowned, studying the map intently. "Here," she guessed, her finger hovering near the mark. "Close," Christian said, moving her hand slightly. "Here. Stewart Mansion." Anna's brow furrowed as she traced the lines with her finger. "It's so small," she murmured. "Everything looks small." "That's the thing about maps," Christian replied. "They make big places look manageable." Anna didn't answer, but her expression softened slightly, as though the weight she carried had lightened just a little. In another corner of the mansion, Janet sat cross-legged on the floor of the gallery, a sheet of paper spread out before her. Her tiny fingers gripped a charcoal pencil, her brow furrowed in concentration as she sketched the contours of one of the paintings on the wall. Megan watched from the doorway, a smile tugging at her lips. "You have quite an eye," she said, stepping inside. Janet looked up, startled, but relaxed when she saw Megan. "It's not as good as the real one," she said shyly, gesturing toward the painting. "It doesn't have to be," Megan replied. "It just has to be yours." Janet tilted her head, considering this, and then returned to her sketch. Megan knelt beside her, watching the careful movements of her pencil. "Would you like some proper supplies? Paints, maybe?" Janet's hand paused mid-stroke. "Really?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Of course," Megan said warmly. "Every artist needs the right tools." Janet's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "Thank you." Moments like these gradually became woven into the household's fabric as the days went by. Christian, once distant and reserved, found himself drawn into small but meaningful interactions with the girls. Teaching Anna how to read a map, or listening as Janet explained the details of her sketches. Megan, too, found her role expanding. She became a source of comfort and stability, guiding the girls with a gentle hand that reminded Christian of her quiet strength during his own childhood. Yet amidst the growing warmth, there were shadows. Anna avoided questions about their past, deflecting with curt answers or changing the subject entirely. Janet followed her sister's lead, though her silences were less guarded and more wistful. It was clear that whatever they had endured had shaped them, leaving marks that neither time nor kindness could easily erase. One evening, as the family sat together in the drawing room, Christian glanced at Anna, who was curled up with a book on the sofa. "Do you like to read?" he asked casually. Anna shrugged without looking up. "Sometimes." Christian leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What's your favorite story?" Anna hesitated, then muttered, "I don't know. We didn't have books." The admission was so quiet that Christian almost missed it. He exchanged a glance with Megan, who gave him a knowing look. "We'll fix that," Christian said gently, his voice steady. "There are plenty of books here. You can have any of them." Anna didn't respond, but for the first time, her rigid posture seemed to ease. The room fell into a companionable silence, the kind that only existed between people who were slowly, carefully, becoming a family. The gallery was quiet that afternoon, bathed in the soft, diffused light filtering through high-arched windows. Dust motes swirled lazily in the air, illuminated by the golden glow of the late sun. Janet stood in the middle of the room, her eyes fixed on a large oil painting near the end of the gallery. It was a pastoral scene, rolling green hills and a sun-drenched valley, the colors vivid enough to make her almost forget the world around her. But something about the painting bothered her. The frame was slightly off-kilter, tilted just enough to catch her attention. She tilted her head to one side, then the other, as if aligning her gaze would fix it. "Anna," Janet called softly, her voice echoing faintly in the large space. Anna was in the adjacent room, flipping through a heavy book Megan had given her. "What?" came her distracted reply. "This painting's crooked," Janet said, stepping closer. "I think I can fix it." Anna appeared in the doorway, her brow furrowing. "Leave it alone," she said. "It's not ours." Janet ignored her, dragging a small stool from a corner of the room. "It's just a little tilt," she murmured, climbing up carefully. Her fingers brushed the gilded edge of the frame as she adjusted it. The painting shifted slightly, and as it did, something dropped from behind it, landing with a dull metallic thud on the floor. "What was that?" Anna asked sharply, her book forgotten as she moved toward her sister. Janet stepped down, her eyes wide as she crouched to retrieve the object. It was a key, large, ornate, and old, with an intricate pattern etched into its handle. The bronze surface was tarnished, but the craftsmanship was unmistakable. Anna crouched beside her, their heads close as they inspected the find. "Where did it come from?" Anna asked, her tone both curious and wary. "Behind the painting," Janet said, holding it up to the light. "It's so fancy." "What's a key like that doing here?" Anna muttered, glancing toward the doorway as if expecting someone to come in and demand an explanation. "Maybe it opens something important," Janet whispered, her voice tinged with excitement. "What are you two up to?" Christian's voice cut through the quiet, startling them both. They turned to find him standing in the doorway, his hands in his pockets, his expression curious. "Nothing," Anna said quickly, hiding the key behind her back. Christian arched an eyebrow. "Doesn't look like anything." He stepped into the room, his gaze flicking to the painting, the stool, and finally to Janet's guilty expression. "What's in your hand?" Reluctantly, Janet held the key out to him, her fingers reluctant to let go. Christian took it, turning it over in his hands. The metal was cool and heavy, the ornate design unfamiliar. He frowned slightly, running his thumb over the etched patterns. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "Behind the painting," Janet said, pointing. "It fell out when I fixed it." Christian glanced at the frame, then back at the key. "Strange," he murmured, more to himself than to them. "This doesn't look like it belongs in a house like this." "What does it open?" Janet asked eagerly. Christian shook his head. "I don't know. It's not a modern key, that's for sure." Anna crossed her arms, her voice skeptical. "You think it's important?" Christian considered her for a moment, the weight of the key suddenly heavier in his palm. "Maybe," he said simply, "but we won't know until we figure it out." The girls exchanged a glance, their curiosity clearly piqued. "Can we help?" Janet asked, her eyes lighting up. Christian hesitated, then nodded. "We'll figure it out together. But first," he added, a faint smile playing at his lips, "no more climbing furniture. Deal?" Janet grinned sheepishly. "Deal." That evening, Christian sat alone in the study, the key resting on the desk before him. He turned it over absently, his thoughts drifting. There was something almost ominous about its presence, a feeling he couldn't quite shake. It wasn't just the key itself, it was the timing. First Anna and Janet arriving, now this. It felt like the house, or perhaps something within it, was trying to tell him something. Megan appeared in the doorway, a cup of tea in her hands. "I heard about the key," she said, setting the cup down beside him. Christian glanced up. "Do you know anything about it?" Megan shook her head. "Not specifically, but this house has its share of mysteries. Your father wasn't one to share them easily." Christian frowned, the mention of his father stirring old tensions. "It looks old," he said, his gaze returning to the key. too old to be part of anything modern in the house. Then perhaps it's part of something older, Megan suggested. If it is old, there is no need to find it again. Christian exhaled, leaning back in his chair. The key gleamed faintly under the study's warm light, its secrets locked away. For now. Christian stared at the key in his hand, its cold, tarnished metal pressing into his palm. The intricate patterns etched into its handle hinted at a craftsmanship that belonged to another era, one far removed from the modernity of Stuart Mansion. Something about it lingered in his mind, a faint echo from the past, tugging at the edges of his memory. As he turned it over again, a thought surfaced. The storage room. Stuart Mansion's storage room was rarely entered, a forgotten space tucked behind a heavy oak door at the far end of the west wing. It was a repository of discarded heirlooms and family relics, things too old to display but too sentimental to discard. Christian hadn't stepped foot in there in years, but now the key seemed to demand it. The next morning, as sunlight slanted through the mansion's wide windows, Christian gathered Anna and Janet. "We're going to look for where this key belongs," he announced. Anna frowned. "In this giant house? That'll take forever." Christian smirked slightly. "We'll start in the storage room. It's where we keep old things, and this key definitely qualifies." Janet's eyes lit up with curiosity. "What's in the storage room?" "Memories," Christian replied, his tone almost wistful. "Some good, some complicated." The storage room smelled of dust and aged wood, the air heavy with time and neglect. Christian pushed the door open with a creak, revealing shelves stacked with faded boxes, antique furniture draped in sheets, and a scattering of objects whose purposes had long been forgotten. Anna wrinkled her nose. "It smells weird." "It smells old," Christian corrected, stepping inside and flicking on the dim overhead light. Shadows stretched across the room, casting an almost ghostly aura over the clutter. Janet wandered toward a stack of crates, her small hands brushing against a layer of dust. "What are we looking for?" she asked, glancing back at Christian. "Something this key might open," he said, holding it up. "Look for anything locked. Chests, cabinets, trunks." The girls began exploring, their movements cautious but increasingly bold as their curiosity outweighed their hesitation. Anna found an old wardrobe with rusted hinges, but no lock. Janet discovered a small jewelry box, but its latch opened easily under her touch. "Over here," Christian called, kneeling beside a large ornate chest pushed against the far wall. Its surface was carved with intricate floral patterns, the wood dark and worn from decades, perhaps centuries, of existence. At its center was a keyhole, perfectly shaped to match the key in his hand. Janet and Anna hurried over, their breaths catching as they saw the chest. "Do you think it's in there?" Janet asked, her voice a whisper. "There's only one way to find out," Christian said, fitting the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click, and the lid creaked open, revealing its contents. Inside, layers of yellowed fabric covered what appeared to be stacks of old photographs and documents. Christian carefully lifted the top layer, his hands brushing against a stack of black and white photos tied together with a faded ribbon. He pulled them free, his breath catching as he flipped through the images. The first was of his father, Billy Stewart, standing stiffly in a formal suit. Beside him was a woman Christian had never seen before, her features soft and kind, with a smile that seemed almost hesitant. Behind them was a toddler, him unmistakably. "Who's that?" Anna asked, pointing to the woman in the photo. "I don't know," Christian murmured, his voice distant. He flipped to the next photo and found another of the same woman, this time holding him in her lap, her expression tender as she looked at the camera. Janet leaned closer, her eyes wide. "She looks nice." Christian set the photos aside, his hands trembling slightly as he uncovered more. Billy stood beside the same woman, their hands clasped, smiles frozen in a moment of apparent joy. The names etched on the back read Billy Stewart and Melissa Bell. Melissa Bell, Christian whispered, the name unfamiliar but suddenly heavy with significance. Anna glanced at him, her brow furrowed. Who's she? I don't know, Christian said again, but the weight in his voice betrayed the growing unease in his chest. His father had never spoken of a Melissa Bell. There had been no mention of another marriage, no hint that Christian's early years had included a woman other than Megan. He stared at the wedding photo for a long moment, his mind racing. If Melissa Bell was his mother, then everything he thought he knew about his family, about himself, was a lie. Let's take this upstairs, he said finally, standing and gathering the contents of the chest. I need to talk to Megan. Anna and Janet followed him silently, their earlier excitement replaced by a quiet understanding that whatever they had uncovered, it wasn't just about the past. It was about Christian's future too, and theirs. The study was dimly lit, the late afternoon light muted by heavy curtains drawn across the tall windows. The faint aroma of old books and Megan's preferred jasmine tea lingered in the air. Christian stood near the desk, a stack of photographs in his hands, the weight of discovery pressing down on him. He hadn't said a word since coming upstairs, and the silence was suffocating. Megan entered, her calm footsteps breaking the stillness. Christian, she began, her voice steady but tinged with concern. What's the matter? He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he placed the photos on the desk, spreading them out so she could see. Who is Melissa Bell? He asked, his tone measured but heavy with an emotion he couldn't yet name. Megan froze. Her usually composed face faltered for the briefest moment before she stepped closer. Her eyes scanned the photos, her hand trembling slightly as she reached out to touch one. Where did you find these? The storage room, Christian replied, his voice sharp now. In a chest locked with this. He held up the key for her to see. What I want to know is why you never told me about her. Why are there pictures of her with my father and me? Take a break and comment. What is your favorite winter drink? Leave your details in the comments. Megan exhaled slowly, lowering herself into a chair by the desk. I suppose I always knew this day would come, she said softly, more to herself than to him. She clasped her hands together, her gaze fixed on the photographs. Melissa Bell is your mother. The words hit Christian with a forceful impact. He stepped back, his mind scrambling to process them. What are you talking about? You're my mother. Megan's eyes filled with something that looked like pain, but she held his gaze. I've always thought of you as my son, Christian. That has never changed. But Melissa, she gave birth to you. Christian's fists clenched at his sides. Why didn't I know about her? Why was she erased from my life? Megan hesitated, her voice tightening. Your father, Billy, he made that decision. Melissa and Billy divorced when you were very young. Their marriage was troubled. He was a controlling man, difficult to live with. Melissa tried to fight for you, but Billy had the resources, the power. She was completely outmatched. Christian's chest tightened, his breath coming unevenly. And you went along with this? You just let him erase her? Megan's voice trembled, but she held her composure. I didn't have a choice, Christian. By the time Billy and I married, the arrangement was already in place. He forbade any mention of Melissa in this house. It was as though she'd never existed. Her eyes glistened, and she swallowed hard. I didn't agree with it, but I thought I believed I could give you the love and stability you deserved." Christian turned away, pacing to the far side of the room. His mind raced, a whirlwind of betrayal, anger, and confusion. "So I've been living a lie," he said bitterly, his back to her. "No," Megan said firmly, her voice rising slightly. "Not a lie. Christian, I may not have given birth to you, but I raised you. Every moment, every decision I made, it was for you. I have loved you as my son, from the moment I married your father." Her words pierced through his storm of emotions, grounding him. He turned back to her, his expression conflicted. "Why didn't you tell me when he died? You could have told me then." "I was afraid," Megan admitted. "Afraid of what it would do to you. You were grieving, trying to find your footing as the head of the family. I didn't want to burden you with this on top of everything else." Christian stared at her, his anger softening into something more vulnerable. He saw the truth in her eyes, the genuine love she held for him, despite the secret she'd kept. Slowly, he sank into the chair across from her. "I don't hate you," he said quietly. "I can't. But I don't know how to feel right now. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about myself, it's all so hollow." Megan reached out, resting a hand on his. "Christian, I know this is overwhelming, but you are not hollow. Your past, your origins, they don't define you. What matters is who you are now and who you choose to be." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the room shifted, not disappearing entirely, but softening, making space for something else. Understanding. Finally, Christian stood, gathering the photographs. "I need time to process this," he said, his voice steadier now. "But I want to know more about her. About Melissa." Megan nodded, her expression resolute. "Whatever you need, I'll help you. I promise." As Christian left the study, the photographs clutched tightly in his hands. He felt the weight of a new truth pressing down on him. But beneath it, there was something else, an ember of hope, flickering faintly, as if daring him to uncover the rest of the story. The drawing room was quiet, the soft hum of Stuart Mansion settling into its usual calm after a day of subdued tension. Christian sat near the fireplace, the flickering flames casting shadows over the photographs spread across the table before him. Anna and Janet had taken to sitting nearby, their initial hesitation around Christian gradually easing into cautious curiosity. Anna broke the silence first. "Melissa Bell." She asked, her voice steady, but carrying a hint of the guardedness that never quite left her. Christian glanced at her, taken aback. "What's happened?" he replied, his tone more curious than defensive. Anna shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "I heard you say her name earlier. It sounded familiar." Janet, seated on the carpet with a sketch pad balanced on her knees, looked up sharply. "Melissa Bell. That was the nice lady, wasn't it?" she asked Anna. Anna tilted her head, considering. "Yeah, from the old neighborhood. She lived next door for a while. Remember?" Christian leaned forward, his interest piqued. "What do you mean? You knew someone named Melissa Bell?" Anna hesitated, her eyes darting to Janet as if gauging whether it was safe to share. "She was our neighbor," she admitted finally. "An old lady who lived by herself. She used to give Janet paper to draw on when we couldn't find any." "She was really nice," Janet added, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "She used to say I could be an artist someday. She liked my pictures." Christian's heart thudded in his chest. "What happened to her?" Anna frowned, her brow furrowing in thought. "She moved. I don't know where, but it was before." She trailed off, unwilling to finish the sentence. "Before we left, too," Janet supplied quietly, her pencil stilling on the page. "I think she said something about going to a place where there were people to take care of her." Christian's mind raced, A nursing home, perhaps? The possibility seemed too coincidental to ignore. Did she ever talk about herself? He asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the storm of emotions building within him. About her past? Anna shook her head. Not really. She mostly asked us about school and stuff, but... She paused, her eyes narrowing as she searched her memory. She had this old box with photos in it. I only saw it once when she was looking for something, but it was full of black and white pictures, like the ones you have. Christian felt his pulse quicken. Are you sure her name was Melissa Bell? Anna nodded. Positive. She even wrote it on Janet's drawings sometimes, like a little note. Christian sat back in his chair, the photographs on the table taking on a new significance. If this Melissa Bell was the same woman from his own past, the mother he'd never known, then her connection to Anna and Janet couldn't be a coincidence. What are you going to do? Janet asked, her voice hesitant but filled with hope. I'm going to find her, Christian said firmly. If she's still alive, I need to know the truth. About her. About why she left. About everything. Anna studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. You really think she's the same person? I don't know, Christian admitted, his voice steady. But if there's even a chance, I have to try. Megan entered the room then, her presence quiet but grounding. She glanced at the table, her gaze lingering on the photographs. What's going on? She asked gently. Christian filled her in, recounting what Anna and Janet had shared. Megan's expression grew thoughtful. It's possible, she said after a moment. Your father was thorough, but even he couldn't erase someone's existence entirely. Perhaps Melissa lived nearby and kept a close watch on you. The thought sent a shiver down Christian's spine. Could she have been watching all these years, waiting for a chance to reconnect? I'll start with the nursing homes in the area, Christian said, standing and gathering the photos. It's a challenging task, but I have no other options. Anna and Janet exchanged a glance, their shared look one of quiet determination. We'll help, Anna said, surprising Christian. This isn't your responsibility, Christian replied, though his voice softened at their offer. Anna crossed her arms, her jaw set. She was nice to us. We owe her. Christian didn't argue. Instead, he nodded, a small, grateful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. All right, we'll do this together. As the night deepened, the mansion seemed to hum with a quiet anticipation. The search for Melissa Bell had begun, and with it came the possibility of answers. Not just for Christian, but for Anna, Janet, and the family they were slowly becoming. The cityscape shifted as Christian drove toward the girls' old neighborhood, leaving behind the gleaming towers of Manhattan for the quieter, worn streets on the outskirts. Anna and Janet sat in the back seat, their voices low as they pointed out familiar landmarks. An old corner store, a cracked sidewalk where Janet had once fallen and scraped her knee. When they reached their destination, the building stood just as Anna had described, a gray, aging structure with peeling paint and rusted fire escapes. It loomed against the overcast sky, carrying the weight of years that neither time nor care had lightened. Christian parked the car and stepped out, the girls trailing behind him. Inside, the dimly lit lobby smelled faintly of mildew, and the hum of a flickering light bulb echoed off the scuffed walls. Are you sure this is the right place? Christian asked, glancing at Anna. She nodded, her expression resolute. It hasn't changed. A man emerged from a side office, his glasses perched precariously on his nose and a clipboard clutched in one hand. His name tag read Victor, and he peered at them with mild suspicion. Can I help you? We're looking for someone who used to live here, Christian explained. Melissa Bell. Victor's expression softened, and he nodded. Ah, Miss Bell. She was here for years, lived alone in apartment 2C, kept to herself mostly, but she was a kind soul. Do you know where she is now? Christian pressed. Victor leaned against the doorframe, thoughtful. She moved out a few years ago, said she was going to a nursing home out in the suburbs. Always talked about needing some care as she got older. Which one? Christian asked, his urgency barely concealed. Rosewood Haven, Victor replied, out past the city line. She always lived quietly, almost 30 years on her own here. A shame, really. She deserved more. Christian nodded, gratitude and determination tightening his jaw. Thank you, he said. As they returned to the car, Anna looked at Christian. Do you think she'll remember us? Christian's grip on the steering wheel tightened as he started the car. We'll find out soon enough. With the address in hand, they set off, the path ahead filled with questions waiting for answers. The nursing home sat nestled among the trees on the outskirts of New York, its modest facade blending seamlessly with the quiet, suburban landscape. Christian parked his car in the gravel lot, his fingers gripping the steering wheel for a moment longer than necessary. The photographs of Melissa Bell rested in his pocket, their presence a silent weight against his chest. Beside him, Anna and Janet climbed out of the car, their expressions mirroring a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Is this where she is? Janet asked softly, her small hand clutching her sister's sleeve. I think so, Christian replied, his voice steady but distant. The interior of the nursing home was clean and welcoming, its air filled with the faint scent of lavender and fresh linens. A receptionist greeted them, and after a brief exchange, directed them to the garden at the back. She's usually there this time of day, the woman said kindly. Melissa loves the flowers. Christian thanked her and led the way down a quiet corridor, his footsteps muffled against the carpeted floor. Anna and Janet remained in close proximity, their presence serving as a stabilizing influence amidst the rising emotions within him. The garden was serene, its paths lined with blooming hydrangeas and clusters of wildflowers. At its center, beneath the shade of an old oak tree, sat an elderly woman in a wheelchair. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, and her hands rested gently in her lap. She stared out at the flower beds with a contemplative expression, as though lost in a memory only she could see. Janet was the first to spot her. It's her, she whispered, her grip tightening on Anna's hand. Christian's breath caught in his throat as he stepped closer. The photographs he had studied so intently came to life before him, the kind eyes and soft smile now marked by the passage of years. Melissa, he called softly, his voice breaking the stillness of the garden. The woman turned, her eyes squinting slightly as she looked toward the sound. Her gaze landed on Janet and Anna first, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. Janet. Anna, she murmured, her voice trembling. Janet nodded, her voice filled with quiet joy. It's us. We came to see you. Melissa's face softened, her hands reaching out instinctively. My little artists, she said, her tone thick with emotion. You've grown so much. Anna stepped forward, her usual guarded demeanor replaced by a rare vulnerability. We missed you, she said simply. Melissa's eyes welled with tears, and she reached for their hands, clutching them as though afraid they might disappear. I didn't think I'd see you again, she whispered, her voice breaking. Christian stood a few steps behind, his heart pounding in his chest. He breathed in and stepped closer. Melissa's gaze shifted to him, her expression turning curious. And who are you? She asked, her tone gentle, but tinged with uncertainty. Christian hesitated for only a moment before he spoke. I'm Christian Stewart, he said, his voice steady, despite the storm of emotions raging within him. Billy Stewart's son. Melissa froze, her hands tightening around Anna and Janet's. Her breath hitched, and her eyes widened as she stared at him. "Christian?" she whispered, as though the name itself were fragile. "It's me," he said, his voice softer now. "Your son." A sob broke free from Melissa's lips as she covered her mouth with trembling hands. Tears spilled over her cheeks as she reached out toward him, her voice shaking. "My Christian, my baby boy." Christian knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I didn't know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know until now." Melissa cupped his face with both hands, her touch light, but trembling. "I was forced to leave," she said, her words spilling out in a rush. "I fought for you, Christian. I fought so hard. But your father, he wouldn't let me stay. He took you away from me, and I didn't have a choice." Tears blurred Christian's vision as he listened, the years of longing and loss etched into her voice. "I'm here now," he said quietly, "and I'm not going anywhere." Anna and Janet watched in silence, their own emotions mirrored in the raw vulnerability unfolding before them. After a moment, Janet stepped closer, placing her hand on Melissa's shoulder. "We told him about you," she said softly. "He wanted to find you." Melissa looked up at Janet, her tears spilling freely. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for bringing him back to me." Melissa pulled Christian into a trembling embrace, her arms wrapped around him with a desperation born of 30 years of separation, causing the garden to tremble visibly. Christian held her tightly, his own tears falling as the pieces of his past began to mend. For the first time in decades, the void in Melissa's heart was filled, and Christian felt a connection he hadn't realized he was missing. The three of them, mother, son, and the sister who had bridged the gap, sat together in the quiet garden, bound by the shared hope of a new beginning. The warm, familiar ambience of Stuart Mansion felt strangely distant as Christian returned that evening, the emotional weight of the day clinging to him like a heavy fog. The reunion with Melissa had stirred a whirlwind of emotions, joy, sorrow, relief, and guilt, leaving him drained yet resolute. He walked through the quiet hallways, his footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors, and found Megan in the study. She was seated by the fireplace, a book resting in her lap, though her gaze was fixed on the flames dancing in the hearth. Megan looked up as he entered, her expression shifting from calm to concerned. "You're back," she said gently, closing the book. "How did it go?" Christian hesitated momentarily, the words tangled in his throat. Finally, he took a seat across from her, the photographs of Melissa still tucked securely in his pocket. "I found her," he said, his voice low but steady. "I found Melissa." Megan's lips parted slightly, surprise flickering in her eyes. She sat forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "And?" Christian exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "She's in a nursing home. Alone." She recognized Anna and Janet immediately, but when I introduced myself, it was like the years fell away. She cried, "Megan?" She held me like I was still a little boy. His voice faltered. I don't even know how to describe it. It was overwhelming. Megan's gaze softened, her hands unclasping as she reached out to him. "I can imagine," she said quietly. Christian's jaw tightened, the weight of his unresolved feelings surfacing. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It didn't break me. It broke my trust." "You're right," Megan admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "You did deserve to know. And I should have been braver." She reached across the space between them, her hand resting lightly on his. "But know this. Everything I've done, every mistake I've made, has come from a place of love. I may not be your mother by blood, but I have loved you as if I were." From the moment I stepped into this house, you were my son." Christian stared at her, the raw honesty in her voice cutting through his lingering frustration. He had always known deep down that Megan's love for him was genuine. Now, faced with her vulnerability, he couldn't find it in himself to hold on to anger. "I know," he said finally, his voice quiet. "And I'm grateful. You gave me a home when you didn't have to. You raised me, and for that, I'll always be thankful." Megan's eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them away quickly. "You're a good man, Christian," she said softly. "Better than your father ever gave you credit for. And that goodness, it's yours, not his. Don't ever doubt that." Christian nodded, his throat tight. "I'm going to make this right," he said, his resolve strengthening, "for both of you. Melissa and you. You're both my mothers, and I won't let either of you feel forgotten." Megan nodded, her expression somber. "I do. And I want to make it right, Christian. If there's anything I can do—" "There is," Christian interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "Help me bring her back into my life, into our lives. She doesn't have to be a ghost anymore." Megan's lips pressed together, and after a long pause, she reached out to cover his hand with hers. "I will," she promised. "Whatever it takes, I'll help. Melissa deserves to know the man you've become." The silence that settled between them was no longer heavy with tension, but filled with understanding. As Christian rose to leave, Megan spoke once more. "Christian," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "whatever you discover, whoever you choose to become because of it, know that I'll always be here. Always." Christian turned back to her, a small, grateful smile breaking through his serious expression. "I know," he said simply, "and thank you for everything." That night, as Christian lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of his complicated family history felt a little less suffocating. He had found Melissa, and he had made peace with Megan. Now, he was more determined than ever to honor them both, to build something meaningful from the tangled threads of his past. Melissa's new apartment was a modest but beautiful space just a few blocks from Stewart Mansion. Sunlight poured through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the soft cream-colored walls. Christian had made sure the place felt like home, enlisting an interior designer to create a cozy yet sophisticated environment. The living room featured a plush sofa, Melissa's favorite flowers on the coffee table, and framed photographs of her with Christian and Anna and Janet, a growing family bound by rediscovered ties. A dedicated team of caregivers and housekeepers ensured Melissa had everything she needed, but it was the presence of Anna and Janet that truly brought the apartment to life. Their laughter filled the halls, and Melissa often sat with Janet, admiring her sketches or offering gentle encouragement. Christian stood by the large bay window, watching as Melissa and Janet worked on a drawing together at the kitchen table. Anna leaned against the counter, pretending not to care but stealing occasional glances at the scene. It was a picture of warmth and resilience, and Christian felt an unfamiliar sense of peace settle over him. Megan walked in, carrying a small gift box. She placed it on the side table and joined Christian at the window. "She looks happy," Megan said, her voice quiet, but content. "She deserves to be," Christian replied, his gaze never leaving the scene. "They all do." Megan nodded, then turned to him. "And you? Are you happy?" Christian paused, considering the question. "Getting there," he said finally. "But it's not enough just to feel it. I want to do something about it. For them. For people like them." Later that afternoon, Christian sat in his office at Stewart Mansion, the walls lined with bookshelves and family heirlooms. In the center of his desk was a thick folder labeled Melissa Bell Foundation. Flipping through the pages, Christian reviewed the initial plans for his new charity fund. The foundation's mission was clear: to provide shelter, education, and opportunities for homeless women and children. It would be a way to honor Melissa's struggles and the resilience of Anna and Janet, ensuring that others wouldn't have to endure the same hardships. He picked up the phone, dialing his assistant. "I want this finalized by the end of the month," he said, his tone resolute. "Make sure we have the best team working on it." "Yes, Mr. Stewart," came the prompt reply. Christian leaned back in his chair, his thoughts drifting to the night he'd found Anna and Janet on that rain-soaked bench. Their presence in his life had been unexpected, but it had sparked something within him, a realization that his wealth and privilege could be used for more than maintaining the Stewart legacy. It wasn't just about money. It was about creating a legacy that mattered. The official launch of the Melissa Bell Foundation took place a month later at a gala hosted in Stewart Mansion's grand ballroom. The room was filled with donors, city officials, and community leaders, all eager to support the new initiative. Christian stood at the podium, his speech short but powerful. "This foundation isn't just about providing shelter or education," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "It's about restoring dignity. It's about giving people the tools they need to rebuild their lives. My mother, Melissa Bell, taught me the importance of resilience and compassion, and my second mother, Megan Stewart, taught me the value of love and sacrifice. This foundation is my way of honoring both of them." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Christian barely heard it. His eyes found Melissa in the crowd, seated with Anna and Janet. Melissa's smile was radiant, her pride unmistakable. Back at Melissa's apartment that evening, the family gathered for a quiet celebration. Janet presented Melissa with a hand-drawn portrait of the four of them: Christian, Megan, Melissa, and the two girls. "It's beautiful," Melissa said, her voice thick with emotion. She looked at Janet, her eyes shining. "You're going to do great things, my little artist." Christian watched the exchange, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and gratitude. "We're all going to do great things," he said, raising a glass. "To family, in all its forms." "To family," they echoed, their voices harmonizing in a way that felt like healing. For the first time in years, the Stewart name stood for more than wealth and legacy. It stood for hope. And Christian knew that this was just the beginning. The crisp morning air carried a sense of renewal as Christian stood at the bottom of the grand staircase in Stewart Mansion, adjusting the cuff of his tailored jacket. Outside, the sunlight gleamed off the freshly washed car, waiting to take him, Anna, and Janet on their short trip to the nearby school. Today wasn't just a routine school day. It marked the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. "Are you ready?" Christian called toward the upstairs hallway. Janet appeared first, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her sketchpad clutched tightly in her hands. "Coming!" she chirped, her face glowing with excitement. Anna followed, her steps more measured, her expression a mix of teenage nonchalance and quiet anticipation. The drive to school was filled with the easy chatter of children eager to share their plans for the day. Janet described a new art project she was excited about, while Anna talked about a science experiment that had captured her attention. Christian listened intently, offering the occasional question or nod of encouragement, his heart full as he realized how much these moments had come to mean to him. As they pulled up to the school, Christian parked the car and turned to the girls. "Before you go," he said, his tone soft but firm, "I want to say thank you." Anna tilted her head, her brow furrowing. "For what?" "For helping me find Melissa," Christian said simply. His voice carried the weight of his gratitude, though it was steady and calm. "You were the ones who remembered her, who gave me the missing pieces. I didn't even know I needed. Without you, I don't think I'd have found her. Or myself. Janet's cheeks flushed, and she gave a shy smile. We just told you what we knew. It was more than that, Christian insisted, his gaze shifting between the two of them. You gave me a chance to reconnect with my mother, to understand my past and make peace with it. That's something I can never repay, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying. Anna shrugged, though her small smile betrayed the pride she felt. You don't have to repay us. You gave us a home. That's enough. Christian's throat tightened at her words. He reached out, resting a hand on Anna's shoulder and another on Janet's. We're a family, he said, his voice firm. And family looks out for each other. As the girls climbed out of the car and waved goodbye, Christian watched them disappear into the school building, his heart full. Melissa's apartment was filled with a quiet excitement that evening. Megan had joined them for dinner, and the small dining table was set with care, complete with Janet's hand-drawn place cards. After the meal, Anna and Janet exchanged a conspiratorial glance before standing and retrieving something from the living room. What's this? Christian asked, watching as they carried a large cloth-covered frame back to the table. Janet beamed. It's for you, she said. From both of us. The girls pulled back the cloth, revealing a painting that immediately brought tears to Christian's eyes. It was a portrait of their new family, Christian, Melissa, Megan, Anna, and Janet, all sitting together in the garden outside Melissa's apartment. Melissa's gentle smile, Megan's steady presence, Anna's quiet strength, Janet's joyful expression, and Christian himself, looking more content than he ever remembered feeling. We wanted you to have something to remind you, Anna said, her voice quieter now. That this is what matters. Christian stared at the painting, his emotions swirling. He stood and pulled the girls into a hug, his voice thick as he said, Thank you. This means more than I can say. Melissa and Megan joined them, their presence grounding and unifying. As the five of them stood together, the painting a tangible reminder of their journey, Christian felt a sense of completion. Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Christian sat alone in his study at Stewart Mansion. The painting now hung on the wall opposite his desk, a silent but powerful testament to everything they had overcome. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the portrait. For the first time in his life, Christian felt like he truly understood what legacy meant. It wasn't about wealth or power. It was about the people you chose to care for, the lives you touched, and the love you cultivated. As the house settled into its familiar quiet, Christian made a silent vow. He would dedicate his life to his family, to the charity, and to ensuring that others received the same second chance he'd been able to provide for Anna, Janet, and Melissa. The final sounds of the evening were filled with laughter and warmth from the apartment down the road, where Melissa, Anna, and Janet were still recounting stories and making plans. The Stewart name now stood not just for tradition, but for hope, love, and redemption. And for Christian, that was more than enough. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.